I want to acknowledge the people in this room who are or have experienced homelessness. I have been stably housed most of my life and have had a great support network that entire time. And I hope that I can, through my words, give justice to the stories that have been shared with me and the experiences that I've seen. I'm going to start with a little story about some things that happened in Multnomah County in Portland, Oregon. In 2013, Multnomah County and the city of Portland formed a Home for Everyone. And it was a multi-jurisdictional collaborative governance structure with the intention of ending and resolving homelessness. It was a big umbrella setup with people with lived experience, practitioners, service providers, foundations, and even elected officials sitting together around a table. I was excited to join it because they put at the center the experiences of people who were experiencing homelessness. There was also a stated commitment to racial equity in governance and participation. Now, it really didn't go that well, but it still mattered. And it still made a difference in that it brought people together, it drove policy decisions, and it provided space for people to build power. In addition, there were all of these great things happening in terms of revenue raising. We saw the votes from the Tri-County area on 2 affordable housing measures and then a supportive housing services measure. That measure alone will bring in approximately $2 billion in revenue over the 10 years in which it is in place. Unfortunately, that moment of feeling that we were aligned towards moving to the end of homelessness has fallen apart. And we now see the signs of happening everywhere of a move towards criminalization and an emphasis on shelter over housing. When we talk about housing and services, we of course also talk about shelter, but it's where we put the prioritization of our dollars that matters most. Permanent supportive housing, the solution to homelessness, has been proven time and time again to be the gold standard of what we need to be doing to end homelessness. It does not mean housing only. It means that you are providing a permanent place for people to live. You are not requiring them to be sober or participate in programs, and you are offering services when they need them and want them. In a study that looked at 26 studies, very academic, we're going to review studies of studies, they found that housing first programs, permanent supportive housing programs, were 88% more effective at ending homelessness than any other kind of program type. This has been demonstrated, yes. So this has been demonstrated repeatedly since 1992. I'm an academic. I'm like, yes, there is an answer. This is not a complicated research question. We know what we're doing, we have money, and yet we still have homelessness, and we have a governance structure that is falling apart. So what happened? I'm going to start first with talking about some of the structural issues that all communities face when addressing homelessness. First and foremost, the homelessness system has been so deeply underfunded for decades since its creation. There is no way to suddenly invest hundreds of millions of dollars and overnight have that system function as well as it can. How many of y'all are in healthcare? Yeah, so when you see the homelessness system data, you're gonna cry because that data system has not been well invested in. It's not like Epic, it's not a Medicaid database, and it really, really causes a lot of issues for people in healthcare. They're like, oh my God, how did this happen? It happened because we've never invested in those systems. In the best of circumstances, producing housing, enough housing would be tough. We've already heard tonight that we do not invest in enough affordable housing, and that is the foundational premise of our country. We created a housing system that says only people who have the privilege of wealth, and at many times the privilege of a certain gender and a certain race, can own a home. We also said that housing was not a human right, that it was merely something that you could access if you deserved it. This is what sets in motion and creates the racial disparities that we see today. In 2021, 35% of people experiencing homelessness in Clark County identified as people of color, and yet they were only 15% of the entire population of Clark County. In 2023, still 32% of the population. This mirrors national trends where African Americans are about 13% of the country population and 40% of the nation's homeless population. Rollbacks in the 70s and 80s have created the intense lack of investment that we see in our affordable housing system, and we are still going to be dealing with that for a long time. In Clark County, when you look at extremely low income and low income community family members, 80,000 units short. You need 80,000 housing units to serve people who are poor. Around the country, we accept that housing production must take a very long time, and we are hesitant to dive into alternative housing models or to think about restructuring taxation. The largest housing subsidy in this country is the mortgage interest rate tax deduction. It is not vouchers. And the people who benefit from that tax deduction are usually upper middle class to wealthy people. It is not people who are middle class. We do not adequately protect our tenants. Here's some sobering news if you don't know it. Clark County, along with King County and Spokane County, in the last 12 months saw the highest filings for evictions in the history of the state since it's been recording that data. Clark County also has the highest rate in the state of eviction filings per capita, meaning that 3.4 people had filings per 100 renters. If we want to know why homelessness continues, looking at our evictions data tells us. We also do not have a stable workforce for people experiencing homelessness to support them. A national study by the National Alliance to End Homelessness found that 74% of homeless service workers did not think their organizations had enough people to meet their mission. In Washington, the vacancy rate for behavioral health professionals with advanced degrees is 29% in 2022. And across the country, only 10% of psychiatrists identify as Black, Hispanic, or Native American. As these structural issues run unchecked, one narrative becomes, well, that permanent supportive housing thing just isn't working. We're seeing this up and down the coast. And yet, we haven't actually gotten a chance to really do it. So that was the doom and gloom. Oh my God, sad, the world's falling apart. But now we'll talk about what we can do. And this is why I became an urban planner. Communities, localities. I believe in our power and that when we work together, when we collaborate, we have more resources and tools at our fingertips than we realize. And one of those important powers is the act of collaboration. My research area is in collaborative governance and participatory planning. And when we talk about collaboration, particularly through these frameworks of governance and policy and plan making, we know that we get better outcomes when we work together. From urban planning, we know that whoever is responsible for the components of implementation of a policy or plan are at the table, it is more likely to be successfully implemented. Medical implementation science teaches us that program recipients are essential participants when developing programs. Shocking, right? When you actually ask people who are going to be doing the program what they think, this was revolutionary, apparently. But yes, when we actually ask people, it's there. People who touch the policy areas should be at that table. At the moment, fields not designed to address homelessness are both having to support people experiencing homelessness, contributing to there being more people experiencing homelessness, or enacting trauma upon people experiencing homelessness. I've done national studies on transit agencies and airports, and yes, there are some groups that just want the people to go away. But more often, you find people who want to help, and they don't know how because they have not been invited in. but they're ready to be at the table and having solutions put forth. A greater understanding happens when we collaborate of the complexity and multifaceted nature of responding to what is in front of us. It's very easy to tell hospitals to stop discharging people to homelessness. It's very easy for hospitals to say, homeless service providers, give us the housing. It's more productive to sit down together and identify how to fix the situation, and then, of course, figure out who the heck's gonna pay for it. We build resilient networks when we work together and collaborate. The people I met through A Home for Everyone are still my network. Matt Morton was like, hey, I know you from somewhere. And I was like, yes, friend, A Home for Everyone. And that continues today. The research center that I run exists largely because of my participation with A Home for Everyone. But collaboration is hard, and it can be messy. What I saw with A Home for Everyone really came through in a number of several issues. And one of the things is we have to understand what collaboration is and is not. Whether it's located in government or convened by a nonprofit or a business, you cannot actually make people go and do the things that they agree to do at a collaborative table. And this is somehow a surprise all the time. You're like, but these 5 elected officials agreed to do this thing. And I'm like, yeah, now they have to go back and convince their friends to do those things too. There is nothing that binds you except your word and your commitment and your relationships. And so attending to that becomes essential to actually making the work happen. It means that we have to value the space as both a place that we are identifying the changes and the structures that we must push against, as well as attending to the relationships, the commitment to learning and growing that happens within it. Plan with people with lived experience of homelessness and with people of color. That is how you will actually create spaces where people feel welcome and can more actively participate in an equal manner. But know that they may tell you some things that you really don't want to hear, or ask for things that you can't do. This means that racially equitable and inclusive engagement and collaboration is even harder. And in Home for Everyone and other studies that I've done, I have found over and over that people of color and people with lived experience value first and foremost honesty and transparency. Do not promise rainbows and unicorns. You cannot make them on demand. But when you meet people and you say what you can do, that can be game-changing. Be honest, assess who you are, and consider what your organization can do and not do. But also, people of color and people with lived experience also want you to try harder, right? Do more, be more, push harder. Push on the structures that seem impossible. I love that the council has on their website front and center advocacy. In academia, advocacy can be a bad word. When people are like, oh yeah, Marisa's an advocate. It's like you're not a real researcher. But I wear that proudly because I will advocate for the right for people to have a home, not just because the research proves it, but because I think it's a moral imperative. And as we recognize that we should and could be advocates for what is right and just, we can find that power with one another. Collaborative governance in homelessness is fundamentally about influencing public policy and program implementation to prevent and resolve homelessness. If I could say that there was one issue that I think collapsed A Home for Everyone in the Tri-County area and the ongoing governance work in the Tri-County was the ability to not address disagreement. When we say collaboration should happen, all too often we think that everyone should have an equal say and stake. But that is not the case. If we know the solution to homelessness is housing, that should be the anchoring and centering goal. It doesn't mean that we do not talk about how to support people who are sheltered. In fact, it demands it. But it shifts how we think about that work and how we invest in it. At this moment, there are people who are running around the Tri-County area claiming lived experience with homelessness because there are people in RVs living on their street and people who are houseless sleeping in their doorsteps. They believe that they have an equal stake and that their ideas about what to do about homelessness, despite never having worked in that area, are as equally valid as someone who has lived that life, someone who has researched that life, or someone who has practiced in that life. And nobody has told them no. Teeing up a process that acknowledges the harms and how to address them in a way that prioritizes the values and experiences of people with lived experience leads us to a series of questions and actions that are actually meant to resolve and prevent homelessness, not just move them around from camp to camp or under bridges to bridges. I want to end on a note of celebration. In between 2022 and 2023, the Council for the Homeless had 1,000, or counted 1,000 fewer people over the course of the year experiencing homelessness. 1,000 households, sorry, 1,000 households. And that's amazing, and we often don't celebrate our victories. 1,000 fewer households. That is powerful work. And that's what gives me hope, because there are people out there doing the work, having successes. People are making progress. Everyone here is contributing to that work. It is never going to be as fast as we want and need, but I believe that if everybody is truly in, you all may realize the dream for a home for everyone. Thank you.